What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. It's Sunday. You know what that means. I'm here with preseason power rankings. This is the last Power 5 conference we're going to be doing. It's the Pac-12. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Yesterday, of course, I did not upload a video. It was my top 10 player day, but I figured, you know what, I'll do all the defensive positions in the same week. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're going to see defensive linemen, linebackers, and defensive backs. And my personal top 10 in each one of those categories. Monday, tomorrow, I'm going to take off as I did yesterday. But today, I am here for you guys. Again, Sunday, power ranking time. We're going to talk about the Pac-12 in a little bit. But first, hey, thank you guys so much for the support on the channel lately. If you like what you see in this video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also share it. It helps push out content that people otherwise wouldn't be able to see. It, again, helps me with the YouTube algorithm as well. You can also, hey, if you like what you see from me as well, I'm just a huge college football fan. I'm no expert. I know I'm not going to be right on everything, but I try to provide the most accurate information possible. However, with this being an opinion video, hey, if you agree with me or maybe even disagree with me, if you just like what you see, go and hit that subscribe button down below. The channel's almost tripled subscriber count in the past couple of months, and I'm very, very grateful for that. So without further ado, let's talk about the Pac-12 in 2021. Also, you can leave a comment down below. Forgot to mention that. Leave a comment down below. Tell me your thoughts on the Pac-12 this year. Maybe even who you have winning the Pac-12. As, of course, be nice to everyone. That's all that I ask. These videos are made for us to agree to disagree, but I don't think too many people are going to disagree that I have Arizona at number 12. I mean, this team just has not proven itself. There's been a lot to like. There have been some good players that have come through Arizona, and it just has not gelled together. 0-5 last year. Again, the Pac-12 last year didn't have the biggest of sample sizes, as they were one of the conferences that started really late, like started in November late. So not a huge sample size for teams in the Pac-12. Arizona, of course, did not win a game last year, returning 76%. That's a decent number. Returning Gunnell at quarterback, who has played some promising minutes and looks like a promising player, but the rest of Arizona does not, at least right now. There are some people telling me that, oh, Arizona's going to be better. They got some guys coming in. They got some guys coming up. I'm sure they do. Usually that's what every team says, right? In Arizona, you'd have to think things get better at some point because they used to be a pretty good football program. Not too long ago from what I can remember, but as of late, Arizona just hasn't proven that they can maintain that level. And until they can get back there, Arizona, for me, worst team in the Pac-12, sitting at number 12. 11 for me is Washington State. Now, 87% returning production. Again, returning production numbers, I forgot to mention this for Arizona. They're before transfers, and I believe before the draft, everything, so take it with a grain of salt. Again, some players declared for the draft after. That number has fluctuated throughout the season, but the big thing it doesn't include is transfers. However, Washington State, well, yes, they are actually getting a transfer. They're getting Jarrett Guarantano at quarterback. Hopefully can help with the passing attack a little bit. I thought Guarantano was solid at Tennessee, but a lot of things that he needs to work on to be good for Washington State. Now, of course, Mike Leach no longer here, went to go over coach at Mississippi State. For Washington State, this is a team that can have a pretty solid offense, right? When you look, only 384 yards, granted, again, only played 4 games. But the offense is there, right? We've seen the offensive potential, and it wouldn't be right if I didn't mention Max Borghi, one of the most underrated or overlooked running backs in the nation. Played under Mike Leach with that air raid attack, didn't really get to rush the ball, and now this year will finally get his first full season to prove that, hey, why are you overlooking me? I'm Max Borghi. He's going to be able to prove himself this year, and I think can lead to some great things for the Cougars. Washington State, though, overall, when you look at their defensive numbers, yeah, that's not great. They had one of the worst pass defenses in the nation last year. Overall, that defense has got to clean it up, and maybe it does a little bit this year. I think their offense can win them some games, can pull some things out, but I think their defense is going to lose them more games than their offense is going to win, and that leads me to putting Washington State at number 11. All right, number 10 is the Oregon State Beavers. If you want to flip Oregon State, Washington State, I'm not going to argue with you too much, but I do feel like Oregon State does get the edge, especially when you look at their returning production on the offensive end. 94% offensive returning production for Oregon State. That's one of the best offensive returning production numbers in the nation. Again, take the numbers with a grain of salt, but still one of the best in the nation. They have their quarterback Jebbia coming back. They have Jefferson coming back, I do believe. Jermar Jefferson, really solid running back there for Oregon State. And this was a team that played all 7 of its games last year. Granted, only went 2-5 in those games. In recent years, it seems like Oregon State has been trending up. Now, again, last year was weird for a lot of teams and good for others, so we'll have to wait and see what happens this year for teams like Oregon State, who was trending in the right direction in 2019, and then it kind of took a step back in 2020. We'll see what Oregon State can do this year, but their offense, I think, is sneaky good. They have some good weapons at wide receiver as well. Almost 29 points a game last year, and when you look at the rest of the offensive numbers, those are decent. But the same story with Washington State is their defense has to get better, allowing 33 points a game, 450 yards a game, again, roughly, rushing and passing, both allowing over 200 yards per. Oregon State's a team that, again, has to improve defensively. Their offense can win them some games this year, I do believe. But again, that same story with Washington State. The defense has got to get better. Need to see that improve. Oregon State's at number 10. Number 9 for me is Cal. So the California Golden Bears, also 1-3 last year, same record as Washington State, only returning 81%. Now, when you look at the number last year for Cal, it was pretty insane. It was somewhere in the ballpark of like 93% overall returning production. This year, not so much. And Cal is a team that, well, when you look, the defensive numbers are solid, but they're allowing more points than the yardage would tell you. But the offense was not there last year for Cal. Now, Garbers is coming back as that quarterback for Cal. But overall, when I look at the roster, yeah, there are a couple players to get excited about on both sides of the ball, Garbers being one of them. But even he didn't have a great season last year, and that's what led to Cal's downfall. Now, I know they beat Oregon last year, but that was also their lone win. Oregon was trying out some things last year as well. Of course, new starting quarterback. Yes, that's an upset loss. It's a game that Oregon absolutely should have won. But for Cal, with that being their only win, it feels like Cal left a lot more on the table last year. And if California wants to improve and get better, well, they overall have to play better. Garbers has to have a better season. Their returning production from the past couple of years has to show. The defense can improve in some areas. There are other areas where Cal's defense is actually pretty good. But overall, need to see a little bit of improvement there. And the offense needs to be able to give support to this defense. If the offense can give support to the defense, Cal could really contend for a bowl game. Now, of course, I didn't do a preview prediction video on Cal, but to me, they are number 9 in the Pac-12. Number 8 in the Pac-12 is Colorado. So they were 4-2 last year. They were kind of a pleasant surprise last year. And of course, this was the team that went out and played San Diego State. So a team that, of course, not part of the Pac-12. Colorado ended up winning that game anyway. But for Colorado, they are losing Sam Neuer, who was the starter last year. He's entered the transfer portal, so that's a loss for Colorado. But they do have one of the better running backs in the nation. That's Jarek Broussard. And when you look at their rushing yards per game, Jarek Broussard was a big part of why Colorado was averaging over 200 yards on the ground last year. And when you look, the offense, again, had some pretty solid numbers. But again, defensive support. That's something that I'm harping a lot about the Pac-12 on, right? It seems, right? Defensively, Colorado could have played a lot better. And I know when you look, there were some instances on the field where Colorado's defense actually looked pretty good. But then there were other instances where it had the opposite effect, and it looked pretty bad. However, for Colorado, it's a team that I've always said, I'm not super high on this team. I don't think last year was necessarily a fluke or anything. It's just that I don't necessarily think Colorado's going to replicate the 4-2 record over the course of 12 games. And if you map that out, then that leads to an 8-4 record. And I don't think Colorado is quite there yet. Now, Colorado's losing some pieces, and they're going to have to fill in some spots. Overall, this team can be a solid player in the Pac-12. I think it's going to be hard for them to get to a Pac-12 championship like they were contending for last year. Overall, I think Colorado, fairly solid team. But to me, they are number 8 in the Pac-12. All right, so number 7 for me is Stanford. Now, I have to explain this one because Stanford, in a lot of people's eyes, is going to take a step back this year. And when you look at that returning production, I can absolutely see why people think that. If you want to switch Stanford and Colorado, I am not going to argue with you. However, the reason I have Stanford ahead of Colorado is because, yes, in fact, is that I'm not super high on Colorado, but it's also that I'm pretty confident in what Stanford can do this year. I know they're losing Davis Mills to the draft. Lots of other pieces on the offensive end are gone as well, even a lot of pieces on defense. However, overall for Stanford, I think the talent level is still there. And I think Stanford really can surprise some people this year. Can they make a bowl game? I think absolutely. The schedule is a little tricky, but I think Stanford is capable of pulling off an upset or two this season. Again, they're going to have to replace Davis Mills. That's not an easy thing to do, especially since Davis Mills had 287.3 yards passing per game last year. Again, that's not all Davis Mills, but most of it, right? So Stanford's going to have to retool a little bit and reload a little bit in order for them to have the success that they had last year. Look, they were 4-2 last year. Pretty decent team. This is a Stanford team as well that, could not necessarily do that record again over the next 6 games. And again, that being 8-4. But with Stanford, hey, this is the team that I do feel like can surprise some people. Mills is not going to be an easy quarterback to replace. But overall, I do believe that the talent is there for Stanford. And that's why I have them at number 7. All right, number 6. And this is where we're going to start to get into some teams that I think are being underrated. Number 6 is UCLA. Like many Pac-12 teams, they have one of the highest marks in returning production, 91%. And UCLA took some steps forward last year. We keep talking year after year about, Chip Kelly's not doing anything at UCLA. Chip Kelly this, Chip Kelly that. Chip Kelly should be fired. Chip Kelly should be fired yesterday. Well, when you look last year, UCLA took some steps forward. And I think Chip Kelly's team looks pretty solid this year. Again, returning Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Now they have one of the most underrated group of running backs in the entire nation with Zach Charbonnet transferring over. You also got a guy like Britton Brooks back there as well. UCLA's got a lot of nice pieces on the offensive end. One of the better tight ends in Greg Dulcich. I just talked about him last week in my top 10 tight end video. And when you look, hey, if they can continue these kind of numbers, well, UCLA could prove themselves to be a 7-5, 6-6, a solid bowl game team, which is what I have them as. And they have a chance to prove it too. They do have a game against LSU. So that's going to be a very interesting game to watch. And I have a feeling, my game is going to be closer than a lot of people may say. I know a lot of people are like, LSU is going to blow out UCLA by 20 plus points. I don't know. I think the game can be fairly close. Again, it depends on how UCLA plays. Do I think they're going to win the game? No, but there is a chance. UCLA is one of the more underrated teams in the nation and the number 6 team for me in the Pac-12. The number 5 team in the Pac-12 is also underrated, and that is the Utah Utes. Now, this team should have one of the better defenses in the Pac-12 last year, although that wasn't necessarily the case last year. They were still a pretty solid defense. And when you have the factor of 91% of your production last year coming back, along with other players that didn't play last year coming back, and some transfers as well, Utah is looking pretty good. And I have Utah at 9-3 this year. Now, I know a lot of people are bugged about that BYU loss. Look, BYU's offense is going to win them some games this year. Don't pay too much attention to the predictions. It's just try to get them to the 9-3 mark, which is what I think Utah is capable of, right? 9-3. They were in the Pac-12 championship in 2019, weren't necessarily the favorites to win the game. But hey, if they would have won that game, they could have made it to the college football playoff. Who knows? So for Utah, their offense as well. Look, they're bringing in Charlie Brewer at quarterback. How much does that change things for Utah? And how well does Charlie Brewer play? Well, we're going to have to see how that works out. But the defense should be one of the best in the Pac-12. Maybe might even be the best in the Pac-12. And then when you look at the offensive end, they're bringing some pieces in, and if those pieces prove to shine, Utah can be a team that you got to watch out for. For me, Utah and number 5. Number 4 is the Washington Huskies. And if you want to have them at 3 going ahead, or if you want to have Washington at 3 instead of the team you're going to see at 3, you can go right on ahead and you can swap 3 and 4. Again, there are a lot of places in the Pac-12 where 3 and 4, or 8 and 9, or 7 and 8. Like there are a couple places that are very close. But Washington, I put at number 4. They've had some injury problems as of late. Defensive player goes down with an injury, probably going to be out for the season. And this was one of the better defenses in the Pac-12 last year, and still can be. But again, returning only 73%. I know they're getting some transfers to help with that. But overall, Washington's defense still looks pretty solid, even with the injury to that aforementioned player. His name has escaped me right now, so for that I apologize. But losing him, and I know he's an impact player. And on the offensive end, look, you're returning your starting quarterback. You're bringing in a quarterback that could also play some really solid minutes. The number 1 quarterback out of this latest recruiting class. And yes, you do have some other key players on the offensive side transferring out, but overall the talent is here for Washington. It does have to emerge a little bit, and 3-1 last year is a very promising start. They're carrying momentum into this season here in 2021. Washington, though, it's the little things, right? The little things have got to get better. Maybe the defense can be a little bit better in the red zone. The offense, again, can also be a little better in the red zone. But Washington overall looks like a really solid team. Could contend for that Pac-12 North with the team you're going to see in a little bit. Washington at number 4. Some people might say I'm too high on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Again, only went 2-2 last year. But again, that involved some pretty close games. A game against USC that they could have won. And then another game after that they also could have won. But ended up blowing out Arizona in the season finale 70-7. So Arizona State is carrying momentum. Now, I know there's this investigation and things going on with Arizona State. Yes, I get that. But Arizona State is still a very, very solid team. And when you look overall at the stats, it's a pretty good stat line. Now, albeit the defense can give up less yards. I mean, when you look 435 yards per game, like that is insane. But their defense forces turnovers. Only 23 points per game compared to the offense's 40. Arizona State's going to be an experienced team coming into 2021. It's a team that I really like a lot. I think Jaden Daniels has been forgotten about. You got some solid players in the running back position and solid players in the wide receiver position as well. Well, even though Darby is gone, even though Ayuk is gone, even though Benjamin is gone, Flowers is Arizona State still got a lot of good players on the defensive end. Yeah, you'd like to see it improve in certain aspects of the game. But overall, I am very high on this Arizona State team. I think this team could end up winning the Pac-12 South. Do not be surprised if they are ahead of USC. And speaking of USC, they are at number 2. Arizona State's at number 3. I just teased it. Here you go. USC at number 2. They do have one of the lesser returning production numbers in the Pac-12 with only 69%. Nice. But for USC, 5-1 last year, made it to the Pac-12 championship game undefeated, where they lost to, of course, the team that inevitably is at number 1 by process of elimination. And that rushing attack has to get better. Not even 100 yards on the ground last year. That is abysmally horrible for a program like USC that usually has some good running backs. But hey, what they make up for on the ground, they do through the air. Keaton Slovis, one of the better quarterbacks in the entire nation. In my opinion, top 3 up there with Rattler, Howell. Probably throw Daniels, Willis, King, Purdy up there as well. Desmond Ridder I have in the top 5. So, Slovis is one of the better quarterbacks in the entire nation. And he has some good weapons around him. Now, they are getting Keontae Ingram over from Texas. That could help boost their rushing attack, in my opinion. But the defense is going to be the story of the season this year. Now, their defense, when you look at the numbers, they're like, oh, those are actually some pretty solid and respectable numbers. Why do you say the defense is the story of the season? Because it's lost them games before. USC's defense has lost them games before. Now, I think USC's offense is good to win them a lot of games, but the defense has to step up and play better. And USC as of late has been their own worst enemy. Now, I know people are going to say, well, the offensive line is a big concern too. I'm not saying the offensive line isn't a concern. Definitely is a concern. But in my opinion, it's not going to be the story of the season. People are going to look to that defense to say, well, this is this is why USC didn't have a good season because their defense wasn't very good. Or, hey, USC had a really good season because look at their defensive numbers. The defense will be the story of the season in my mind. Yes, they have to fix things on the offensive line. And actually just lost a transfer linebacker to Ohio State. That'll help the Buckeyes linebacking group as they were going to be young and inexperienced. So USC at number 2. But at number 1 is the reigning Pac-12 champion, the Oregon Ducks. And they've won the past couple Pac-12 championships. And I say couple, that again, that being a relative term. Only 4-3 last year, and I can see why people might be overrating this Oregon Ducks team. But in pretty much everyone's top 25 poll up to this point, including my own to this day, Oregon is in the top 10. There some really good things are happening in camp. Now, overall, the team last year, I don't think is what it's going to be in 2021. When you look at the stats last year, very similar numbers between the offense and defense. When you look at returning production, they're returning a lot on both sides, although a lot of defensive backs are leaving this Oregon team. However, I think Oregon's going to be a very, very good team coming into next year. Definitely my favorite to win the Pac-12 next year. Possibly could contend for a playoff spot, but the schedule is a little tricky. Again, they have to play Ohio State on the road, which is not going to be easy. I don't know what else you want me to say about Oregon. Are they going to be overrated? Maybe, possibly. There are also a lot of games on the schedule in which Oregon can trip up and games on the road. But overall for Oregon, I think this team is going to be exceptional in 2021. So that does it. Pac-12 power rankings are over. Remember to like, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Also leave a comment down below. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'm taking tomorrow off, and then we'll get into top 10 defensive players all next week. Goodbye.